periods exist because that's part of how we have our fertility. That's how we make babies. I can't believe I have to say this to like a 27-year-old and whoever his audience is. But I am here to say that I am not here for period shaming. Like that needs to be behind us. Like in The Lion King, put the past behind you. That has got to be in the past. It needs to stay in the past. Like we are not doing that here in 2025, almost 2026. Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of The Present Illness. I don't know if you've missed us, but we have definitely missed you. Our podcast is one where two physicians try to make sense of a world that is a little febrile and definitely underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan Salles, a surgeon scientist, and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
And I'm Alyssa Burgart, an anesthesiologist and ethicist who tracks news and health law cases like their EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other.
As always, we want to send a big shout out and thank you to folks who are listening and to those who follow and subscribe. And a warm welcome to anyone who has just stumbled in from watching that notorious Diddy documentary.
Ugh, I have not watched it. Should I watch it?
That is an excellent question. So here's my feeling for folks who are considering it. I think it is very interesting. What is most clear about it is that Diddy is a despicable person. Sean Combs is a despicable person in more ways than I think most of us even understood, unless you had some personal connection to him, perhaps. But there's a lot that, aside from the freak-offs and the sexual assault, et cetera, that he wouldn't. I know this is not our main topic for today, folks, but he wouldn't pay people routinely, would not pay people, would not pay the artists on his label. I mean, there's just a lot.
Are you telling me that when somebody's horrible in one domain, they're sometimes also horrible in multiple other domains?
Yes. Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
Because you know this. So that's, if you're interested in understanding more about this man and his numerous flaws and abusive qualities, I think it's worth a watch. If you want to know, truth, I'm not sure that it gives us that. People ought to know that the person who produced the documentary is a big time Diddy hater. And that is his primary motivation. 50 Cent is the person who made this documentary. He has hated Diddy for at least 20 years. So, make of that what you will. I've seen various journalists who are involved in or have reported on Tupac and Biggie and others who are part of the hip hop universe and were early on when Diddy was, experiencing his rise. And so these journalists online have said, well, this part in the documentary was not true because I interviewed this person at that time. Here's what they said. And so, I think it's probably some level of approximation to truth, but it's not like
Sure.
a definitive telling of what happened to Diddy and Pac and Biggie and all the
Yeah.
all the various survivors who were left in all of their wakes. And it's worth
Yeah.
noting also that 50 Cent himself has had multiple cases and accusations around domestic violence and sexual assault. So it's not like he's some paragon of virtue. So it's, if you keep all those things in mind, I think it's interesting. It's certainly informative. It's hard for me to tell which exact parts that are storytelling are true versus not true or how much of it is true.
Okay.
But it
But
sure does give you a sense of how terrible this man is. So I think it does do that.
okay, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I have the capacity to lean into that, but I'll think about it. Um,
Fair enough.
but thank you for doing the heroic work of watching it.
Anytime.
Um, well,
I
folks,
did it for the people,
you did it for the people. Well, folks, whatever it is that you've stumbled in from, we are glad you're here. We're going to get into it. I want to start first off by saying that we had a lovely comment from Dr. Katie Schenk via LinkedIn. And she listened to our last show and she wrote, I found this episode really insightful and thought provoking. So, Dr. Schenk, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you.
Yes, as always, folks are welcome, as we'll remind you again later, to leave ratings and reviews for us, especially if you like us. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is this growing divide between girls and boys and men and women in our society. I've talked about this myself for a couple of years now. I had a viral video a couple of years back about some data showing that there's a growing ideological divide between men and women, not just in the United States, but actually across multiple different countries, which seems to be mostly driven on average by women becoming more liberal and men staying the same or becoming more conservative. But it's really that women on the whole are tending to become, again, on average, more liberal. So there was some Pew data that came out a few weeks back that garnered quite a bit of attention. And it was a survey of high school students. And there are multiple points in that survey, but we're just going to mainly talk about one. The question was they had asked 12th graders, so high school seniors, how likely they were to want to choose to get married in the long run. And back in 1993, girls were slightly more likely than boys to want to get married. 83% of girls at that time said yes, they wanted to get married, and 76% of boys. So pretty similar. Both groups, the majority wanted to get married. In 2023, which is the most recent data, girls now only 61% of them want to get married. So that's a 22-point drop. Whereas for boys, 74% of them said they wanted to get married. So from 76% in 1993 to 74% in 2023. So basically the same, right, for boys. But when you look at the figure, for those who are listening, you won't be able to see it, but for video folks, will add this in. But when you look at the figures, so the lines are crossing, where before you had girls being more interested in marriage than boys, and now girls are less interested in marriage than boys. And when these data came out, there were certain parts of the internet that were very upset about this because how dare girls.
Which parts? Which
Yeah,
parts?
I
Tell me.
know. How could anyone have predicted this? It was a lot of men, right? Conservative leaning men tending to be the ones who were upset, saying things like, this is a catastrophe, this is a disaster, being very upset that girls would choose perhaps to not want to get married without, what I found mostly lacking there was any introspection about why it might be that women would be less interested in getting married in 2023 compared to 1993. And we can think of many things that have happened, right? Including greater independence for women. I mean, there's lots of things that we don't need men for. We no longer need a man to approve a bank account for us or approve a credit card for us or to buy a house, right? We are now allowed, as of today, December 11th, 2025, mark my words, as of today, we are still able to do those things on our own. And so the need for a man to help us live a life is less.
Well, and for context, when you're talking about data from 1993, what that's making me think about is, those are folks who were being raised from folks who themselves came of age in the late 60s, early 70s for the most part, I would presume. And so in the 70s is actually when was it 1968 that women got the right to have a credit card without a man's approval?
I do not remember the exact date. We'll look it up
I'll
and
do,
put it in the show
I'll,
notes.
yeah, I'll fact check it. I think it was 1968, but I'll check. Um, but just thinking about that, my mother, when she became an adult, could not have a checking account by herself. And then, sorry, not a checking account, a credit card, for example. And now my mother can have that. I have a kid who's a teenager, and that means that the data set that you're thinking about, it sounds like it's largely people who have been raised probably by folks who are around our age. Does that sound about right?
Probably
Maybe a
if they're
little older?
12th graders. Yeah, maybe a little bit older because they're 12th graders. These kids are 12th graders in 2023.
Sure. So it's interesting because it also means, when you think about these generational changes that have happened over the last 50 years, you see that, of course, in like, how is it that teenagers are showing up into their adulthood? What have been their, sort of formative experiences and all of that? So just thinking about that in context.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the other side of it is if we no longer need men, and this is, of course, we're talking about heterosexual pairings because that's what these data we're looking at, which is obviously a limitation. But when we're looking at heterosexual pairings and heterosexual marriage, what's the cultural aspect of it, aside from the legal side? If we don't need men, then the question is, do we desire men? And what about men is desirable? And that's where I think a lot of these men who are upset were not connecting the dots, right? A guy named Wilcox said anti-nuptial turn among young women and adolescent girls is disastrous. And this other guy, Adam Singer, said incredibly bleak chart has to be some combination of social media promoting a hedonistic lifestyle from a young age, which I thought was a very interesting one. And then many peers are incels or degens, so visibly not viable mates. So at least he picked up on that. Teachers are radicals. No idea where he's going with that one. And then parents not instilling good values and relationships at home, not great. And this other guy, Andrew Colvet, says something has gone terribly wrong. And that's where we agree, Andrew. Something has gone terribly wrong.
And the kids are noticing.
Yeah. Well, we've had, right? So we talked about some of the legal things that have changed, but we've had a rise in the manosphere, right? Over these last however many years since the internet, 20 years or so, um, where young people are getting directly to their phone views that are not conducive to a community, to building a community and to respecting each other. And specifically, when we're talking about boys and girls and men and women and romantic relationships, we've got all these folks like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate who are saying all sorts of terrible things. And even I would put, honestly, Scott Galloway into this category of folks who are, Scott, I think, thinks he's doing good things, but he's saying actually a lot of harmful things. Whereas Andrew Tate and
That
Jordan Peterson, I think they know that they're doing terrible things.
Yeah, I haven't read Scott Galloway's book, but I've seen some interviews and I read an excerpt and I was just like, "Bro, you are not helping. You have way too much confidence in your abject lack of understanding of gender." Like, I don't understand how you thought you should write a book about boys. I don't get it.
No, it's clear. I haven't read the book either. I've just seen the clips online, and it seems very clear to me that he does not understand what the root problem is here, and so he's giving advice that's quite bad. I mean, the one example I'll give, in case folks haven't come across it yet, is like when he's talking about how um, basically women should be building more relationships with men. Right? The problem is men are
Oh, blame
lonely.
the women. Blame the women. Oh my gosh. Thank
What a novel
goodness
idea!
someone's blaming the women.
No one's ever done that before. So yeah, I mean, I think it's things like that where well, yeah, men are lonely, and it's because women aren't giving them a chance. Women aren't, taking the time to build these relationships.
But for context, the title of the book, and again, I'm not going to criticize the content of the book because I have not read the book, but the things that he's saying and the things that you're telling me, the book is called Notes on Being a Man. It's not Notes on Being a Woman.
It's an excellent point, and yet he seems to have no problem talking about what women should be doing. But I think he's a lesser of the evils compared to like the Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson types. Um, and altogether, though, they're putting out this message to young boys and men about what is normal in a relationship and how they should be interacting with women and girls, and the messages are caustic. I mean, Andrew Tate, I was just looking for something the other day for one of my videos, and I came across a tweet from last year where he says, if you enjoy having sex with a woman, that's gay. Really? Yeah. Well, he also thinks everything is gay.
Oh my God. I purposefully try to not ever see anything from Andrew Tate. Like that's something I do for me. But I'm just trying to understand like so he doesn't want men to enjoy sex?
No, because women aren't valuable in any way. So
Mm,
you can, I mean, I don't know if you've heard him. He says terrible, terrible things
yeah.
about women and how intimate. I don't. Hate to use that word because I don't think he is intimate, but whatever. How sexual interactions with women should go, and I mean, he talks about how to beat up women. I mean, that's like part of his brand is devaluing and dehumanizing women. And so that's why he says things like that. I'll see if I can find the oh yeah, here. This is the tweet I was talking about. This is from April 24th, 2024. Andrew Tate says, sex is for making children. Any man who has sex with women because it quote unquote feels good is gay. Oh, my pee feels good. This is great. In fact, if you are 40, I know. I know.
Are
It's
are gay men also just screaming externally when they read this, like, I just it makes does none of this makes sense.
No, and I hope there are not a lot of gay people coming across his content because it's really offensive. So he says, in fact, if you are 40 with less than 5 children, you're probably gay. And all that feel good PP sex and hardly any genetic legacy question mark.
What's sad is that there's clearly reactions to this that are not people just laughing at this person's incompetence as a human being. That's what's ridiculous.
Well, not just that, but I mean, I agree that that's ridiculous, but also that this guy's got a massive audience, right? Saying stuff like this. I mean, if you guys should go search, because I was looking for, I had remembered something like this. So I was looking for it for a specific reason. But if you go search his Twitter for the word gay, which I think we all learned many, many, many years ago is, I mean, like, why are we still using that as an insult that's very regressive and offensive? But anyway, he says that for almost anything. Going to the grocery store, that's gay. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, that
Well,
might be an exaggeration, but he uses that all the time because he doesn't have the sophistication to actually build an argument.
this is also and this is for fellow kids of the late 80s, early 90s. Um it's all this is also happening at the same time that the R word has come back, which is the word retarded. It is, of course, incredibly regressive that we're seeing the use of these terms, and these are happening in correspondence with this rise in the manosphere, this inability to recognize and respect the people around us. To your point, no interest in community because it's about dominance, it's about being domineering, about really I don't know. It's the constant protection of this very fragile version of masculinity is terrible.
Right. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about it this week is that there was an interview. So Nick Fuentes, who I don't think most people would think of as being part of the manosphere exactly, but definitely a right wing
Oh,
influencer of
really?
sorts. I don't know because he's not really, well, I guess listeners, you'll have to tell us if you think of him as part of the manosphere. I don't think of him that way because I think of him more as a political commentator. Andrew Tate, I would say like 100% of his content is bashing women. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the whole brand. Whereas Nick is a almost like an equal opportunity hater. He's racist against many different groups. He says that Hitler is, quote, very fucking cool. He thinks black people all belong in prison. You know what I mean? Like he's bigoted in many,
He's
many realms.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing is that one, I think there's a lot of things in the manosphere that actually are very tied to all of those things, even though because I think the misogynoir, the I think that there's a lot of overlap there. And so I think that's part of where he very much strikes me as somebody who's been, red pilled in terms of not just politically, but also in terms of this um, anti woman, anti femininity, anti anything that has to do with, I don't know, respecting other human beings. Again, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I don't know where the lines are drawn.
fair. I don't either. But anyway, so Nick did this interview this week with Piers Morgan, and I've not watched the whole thing, full disclosure, but I've seen multiple clips, and one of them brought to my mind another clip that I've seen from Nick from a couple years ago. So I want to play that for you, and then I want to play a clip from the Piers Morgan interview, and then we can talk about it because this is a person who has a large, and I want to just for our listeners say, this is a person who has a large platform. That's why I think it's worth discussing because I've had people on other platforms say to me, like, why are we talking about this guy? Because he has a lot of influence and he is direct to the phone in the hand of so many young people in this country. And so we really have to reckon with what he is telling people. Okay, so this is the first clip is from I believe his show in 2023. For some reason, I only saw it recently, and it popped into my head when I saw this Piers Morgan clip that I'm going to play in a second. So here's the one from Nick's show in 2023.
Because I was always like the class clown. I was always like bullying women, and women have always been like simultaneously charmed, but also like, oh, stop it, oh, you're so annoying. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. That's how women are with like with this, with like my personality type, you're like a rascal, you know, you're like a bastard. And they're kind of like, because I'm like a rule breaker and stuff. And so women simultaneously are intrigued by that, but they also have to pretend like they're not, because women, it's sort of like how a lot of women want to be raped. And when I say raped, I mean like, that sounds bad when I say it like that.
Yes.
But there's like a lot of women that really want a guy to beat the shit out of them. But also they have to pretend, but part of it is they have to pretend like they don't.
Okay, so we can that's a lot going on in that clip. The first time I saw that clip, I was obviously horrified.
What?
Like, this is, again, reminder, this is a guy with a
The
huge platform. This is what he's telling people, mostly boys and men, that women want to be raped
I mean,
and beaten up.
I will tell you, the very first thing I noticed when he started talking is when he self-identifies as a class clown. Those are people who are inherently insecure. So that's what I find, like, his entire setup. I mean, he clearly doesn't have very much insight, but like those tend to be very insecure people who are trying to like gather security by gathering attention in unusual ways. So I found that to be very interesting. And what a horrible place that he took that to. Like we went from I was sort of a rascal to women want me to beat the shit out of them. Excuse me? Women want to be raped? Go fuck yourself. What I mean, and it's an interesting narrative for him to tell himself and then to tell his millions and millions of especially young men who follow him that this is he is completely normalizing that idea.
Yes. And I think, look, we can say, hey, a lot of people seeing that would have the same reaction we did. A lot of people seeing that would realize that what
Not
he's saying
enough.
is not true. And even if a small number of boys out there watch this and believe it, that is going to lead to real and significant harm. Like, I, I don't know if you've been following the case of Jesse Mack Butler. This is a guy who, when he was 16 and 17, had raped and strangled at least 2 girls and pleaded no contest to these charges. That is the type of behavior that words like what Fuentes says in that clip that I just showed, that's the behavior that is enabled. And just a side note for folks who haven't been following that case, Jesse Mack Butler was originally tried as an adult and could have been sentenced up to 78 years in prison. But instead, another judge came in and ruled that he could be sentenced as a youth, and he got community service.
I mean, he's white, I must assume.
Well, correct. His father, it won't surprise anyone, was involved with the football team at Oklahoma State University. That judge also had longstanding ties with the university. And so he's out in the world. He has done significant harm to at least those 2 girls. And our legal system, it's a sham to even call it that, but our legal system, such that it is, determined that he did not need to serve any time for that. Um, okay, back to Nick Fuentes. The point I was trying to make is just that his words matter. Now, I'm not saying that Jesse Mack Butler listened to Nick Fuentes, but this type of content drives that violence against women and girls. Fast forward to this interview that Nick Fuentes did this week with Piers Morgan, who I should just note, I don't think is a paragon of virtue. That's not why I'm sharing this interview, but it is interesting. So here it is.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So basically, you're just a misogynist old dinosaur, aren't you? For a young guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm the
Yeah.
boomer. I know I'm the boomer here, but actually, you're a 27-year-old dinosaur, aren't you? Aren't you, Nick Fuentes? All women.
I am.
All women are annoying. All women grow
fossil.
old. They all get fat. Says the guy. Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Says the guy who's never got laid.
Yeah, so that's why I played that clip, because this guy is going around acting like he knows anything about women. And first of all, Piers, I never would have pegged for the defender of women, but I guess compared to someone like Fuentes, he is. Anyway, he asked him the question,
Talk
and
about
then Nick
shifting
is
the
like,
Overton window.
"Yeah, absolutely, absolutely." And right before this, if folks are interested, you can find this online. There's a section where Piers is saying, "But don't women deserve equal rights?" And Nick is like, "Absolutely not." And he's like, "Oh, so you don't think women deserve the right to vote?" And he's like, "Absolutely not." That's what precedes this comment about like, "So you're just an old dinosaur." Um, but the point is, the reason I shared that specific clip is he doesn't have close relationships with women, aside from perhaps his mom and his sister. I don't know the nature of those relationships, but he's not have intimate romantic relationships with women. He just said it himself. Yet he is confidently telling his very large audience what it is that women want, and that women want violence, and that we want to be dehumanized. And that's really, really dangerous. And however many boys and men believe this stuff is hurting our communities. It's hurting women and girls all over the world, I would guess. I don't know where all his listeners are, but I doubt they're contained within the landmass of the United States. So that's that. I do want to play one more. Sorry, I'll pause and let you react to that if you have anything else to add to that. And I have one more clip I want to share.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I mean, in relation to really both of these clips, you yes, this rhetoric is amplifying these very, very harmful ideas. And I think it's also important to recognize that these things are also not happening in a vacuum, right? So we know that interpersonal violence is something that many, many children are exposed to. And so when that has already been normalized from often a very, very young age in children, and then as you're growing up and you're trying to make your way of like, how are you going to be in the world? You're showing up, you've got these ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences that we know have long term impacts on children as they go into adulthood. There's data showing that these negatively impact people's health into their 80s and 90s, for example. But separately, these are also things that contribute in general to the cycle of violence. So when you have um, people who have been exposed to violence, they've been victimized by people in their own home, um, witnessed or experienced interpersonal violence, and then are coming into their adolescence and adulthood and are finding this information, this perception as an incredibly normalized, like, oh, this person has a lot of followers, they must be
Hmm.
right. Right. Like there's all of these like shorthands, I think that young people and adults make, that, oh, this is a reliable source of wisdom.
Hmm.
And I can see how that is just going to fuel that cycle of violence. Um, and I can't imagine why nobody wants to sleep with Nick Fuentes. I mean, holy moly,
Well, he also says
sir,
in the
sir, sit
interview that
down.
he finds women difficult. Anyway, to your point, sorry,
Because
to
they're
your
so much smarter than him? That must be really hard for him.
or maybe because they don't like being told that they should like being beaten. I mean, that's not exactly pillow talk if you ask me. But he also or this is all happening to your point. This is all happening when we
Well,
have
Andrew Tate says you're not allowed to enjoy yourself anyway.
yeah. I mean, you should not find any positivity whatsoever in women except for like their ability to carry your baby. That's about it so that you can continue your genetic line since that's what really matters. That's what masculinity is, friends. What I want to say in it like building off what you were talking about for gender-based violence is that there was a big report that came out from the UN recently. It's about 140 women a day are murdered, and the majority of those are murdered by someone who knows us, either a family member or an intimate partner. And I think you already know, but our audience may not, that the number one cause of death for pregnant women in this country is homicide. And so we definitely have a massive problem, even today in 2025, with gender based violence. And people like this, and Andrew Tate, by the way, because he explicitly talks about beating women up. And we all saw, just harkening back to our short Diddy conversation, I think many of us saw that clip of him kicking Cassie in the hallway of the hotel when she was trying to leave. So gender-based violence, to your point, is like somewhat normalized, right, in our society. And then you have people like this with massive platforms doing it and talking about it and suggesting that it's normal and appropriate. So the last clip I want to play this is also from the Piers Morgan interview with Nick Fuentes earlier this week. Let's just listen to it and then we can talk.
Period.
You carry
And
tampons in case your female friends get a period or something. Like, it's crazy. The
I'd
white
have no
knighting
problem.
is
I'd have no problem
diabolical.
giving a female friend a tampon. Would you? Have you ever? I don't suppose you've ever seen a tampon, have you?
Gross. Absolutely not.
You
Get
think,
that away
you think
from me.
tampons are gross?
Yeah, they're
Really?
filled with period blood. Yeah, it's kind of gross.
Wow.
Are you into that? You like that? You,
Have you ever
have
seen
a lot
it?
of tampons?
I don't think you've ever seen it, have you?
I've seen them. I've
Oh,
seen
you
them
have?
before.
You've been that close
Yeah.
to a woman? Really?
No, I've seen them. Look, I
Oh, you've seen
I
videos?
used to live with women, so I've seen them around the house.
I bet you've seen videos, haven't you?
So I saw this clip and I was like, how old is this person?
I mean, he
And
sounds like a child.
he sounds like a child. And also, period shaming.
But you know what? No. You know what? I'm going to pause you because you know what? Actually, I'm raising a child. I am raising a boy. My son would not say that. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is less than this is just so insane. Like i- it's periods are just a normal part of, having body parts. Like there's lots of things that are gross about human bodies and it doesn't change the fact that we need to take care of each other and like grow up. Did you not take like basic sex ed? I don't know I don't know what state he's from, so I guess that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, my reaction to this was, well, first thing that happened when I saw this was I was thinking back to when I was in college. I was dating a guy at the time, and we spent a lot of time at his apartment that he shared with a couple of roommates. And when I was on my period, one of his roommates complained about period products being in the trash in the bathroom. And it was like he actually had kind of like a tantrum about it. He didn't just complain, he had like a tantrum about it. And at the time, I was young and we were in a different era, and it did make me feel bad. Even though, like, what else was I supposed to do? There's nowhere else to put those things. These are not flushable, the products that I was
Well,
using,
because
like,
you were shamed.
yes. And to that person's credit, actually, a few years later, he came and apologized to me about that. But here we are, whatever, almost 30 years later, and we have this guy 27 years old is how old he is, by the way. 27-year-old guy saying tampons are gross. I'm not even sure. Genuinely, I am not sure if he could tell a tampon from a pad. I don't know if he actually knows what these products are. I don't know what he thinks anyone is doing with a used tampon because nobody is handing them to you, bro, like, unless that you have some sort of kink. But like, why does the
I
blood
mean,
in a tampon matter to
tell
you?
me it just says like tell me you don't actually know any women or have any women friends. I mean, that's all this whole conversation is, and the fact that he's being platformed by these exceptionally, already platformed people. It's just I mean, at least Piers Morgan like pushed back on him being such a tool bag.
Yeah, I particularly love the high pitched. Really? After he said, like, "You've actually seen them? Really?" Like, the incredulity on Pierce's side, I did appreciate that. Again, not a Piers Morgan fan, not defending him in general, but I did appreciate that. Um, and, like, how low is the bar if Piers Morgan is the good guy? You
It's
know?
low. It is fucking low.
Yeah, it's so low that it's
How
that
low
easily
can you
cleared.
go? How low can you go? How low?
So, but the reason I wanted to share that is, yes, I agree. He clearly does not have close relationships with women. And just the immaturity of trying to say having periods is gross. I mean, I think we all know, right? Like, that's the reproductive cycle. Without menstruation, you have menstruation is the result of ovulation when the egg wasn't fertilized. If we don't have ovulation, then we can't make babies. If we don't make babies, we can't, um, continue the human race. Which at
But like,
sometimes I'm
ew.
like, do we need to? Do we want to? I don't know. That's a separate question. But um, But there's this whole, like, the Republicans saying we are under-babied, and now he's trying to make, like, periods gross. Periods exist because that's part of how we have our fertility. That's how we make babies. I can't believe I have to say this to, like, a 27-year-old and whoever his audience is. But I am here to say that I am not here for period shaming. Like, that needs to be behind us. Like in The Lion King, put the past behind you. That has got to be in the past. It needs to stay in the past. Like, we are not doing that here in 2025, almost 2026. Okay, so connecting back to the Pew data, I wanted to share these examples so people can hear, like, what is actually being said, like, in the public sphere about women and girls, and how impressionable young people react to that. So if you're a girl, I can just think back to myself as a youth hearing this stuff. It's terrible. I don't wanna hear people saying that I wanna get beaten up. It makes me scared, right? And then to say that, like, my natural body functions are gross, it's all so disparaging and demoralizing, and it does not make me want
I
to be
mean,
close to men.
yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest with you. What this all smacks of to me is my experience of being a teenager in the 90s. I mean,
Mhm,
this these these characters that you've like, brought to light, these personalities they have these massive platforms that didn't exist in the 90s. But like this rhetoric to me, this is late 90s anti-feminism that has gone like and just skyrocketed.
mhm. No, I 100% agree, and I think that's what these young girls are reacting to, at least in part. I'm not, I'm sure they're seeing a lot of other information too. They're seeing, right, the attacks on reproductive rights and the calls to, not just from Nick Fuentes, but from our government, to revoke women's rights to vote. All these different attacks on women and feminism. I'm sure young girls are reacting to that too. And then for these men to be like, "Oh no, what a disaster," is a little funny to me, because, like, what did you think was going to be the consequence of suggesting that women shouldn't have rights and that we shouldn't have jobs and that careers, women, yeah, as we talked about multiple times, women are ruining workplaces. Like, what do you think is the consequence of all of that? Is that women don't want to be associated with people who don't see us as humans.
Just feel like I guess if you haven't experienced a lot of consequences in your life, you may not have seen these coming.
I know that it's like the consequences of our actions. There they are, right in our face, and yet we will blame everyone other than ourselves for them. And I think that's hard too. I think it's really hard for women and girls to see, like, I don't know if you see these videos, but I see them on my algorithm, like, all these young women and girls trying to date, and the terrible, terrible experiences they have, not just on the apps, but out in the world with young men and boys. And they're just like, I cannot do this. It is not worth my time to do this. I want to have peace. I don't want to go out and meet someone with the hope of, like, maybe there's something there and then just be disrespected and dismissed. Who wants that? Nobody
Mhm.
wants that. And instead of taking that as feedback, these kinds of folks who have platforms and are speaking, whether it's on Twitter or their podcast or whatever, are blaming women and girls for being less interested in these relationships instead of asking, why is this no longer desirable? Why are men no longer attractive to women who would self-identify as heterosexual? Like, what, instead of asking those questions of what has gone wrong, they lean more into women are terrible, sex is bad, like, whatever, all these things. Um, because that's what's available to them, and that's what's easy, and that's what the algorithms feed them. And that ultimately is creating this massive divide in our society. And I worry about it because I believe in community and I believe we all need community even outside of romantic relationships. But when half of the population is not available to you for that, that's very limiting. And it looks like to me a
Yeah.
bleak future if we can't kind of figure out how to bridge across this divide.
This is just reminding me of a book I read a while ago, but did you ever read, Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism?
I did not. Tell me about it.
Did you ever read this book? Um, it's by a scholar named Kristen Godsey, and I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, so I apologize if I've gotten that incorrectly. But it's about a bunch of research that was done between when Germany was still divided, and so you had East and West Germany, and so you had like the you know socialist, and it's open in its criticism of socialism as well, but really saying like between a capitalist approach in relationships and um, a socialist approach and how that impacts relationships. So, how is it that, like, sort of the culture that you're raised in influences what your expectations are in relationships, and in particular in cis heteronormative relationships? And so they talk about how under socialism there were certainly a lot of issues that the book touches on, but that when your basic needs were met, you didn't look people didn't weren't looking for a man because he had economic advantage, because he was going to provide. Your needs were met. And so the things that those folks were looking for in a romantic relationship and in a partnership were much more clearly like intimacy, partnership, positive relationship, respect, mutual respect and dignity. And so that when it's fascinating when the wall came down, apparently, you had this mixing of people who had been raised in such different economic cultures and the ways that um, men who had been raised in this sort of capitalist expectation where their value was related to their economic offerings, that it was like
Hmm.
their money, their job, their prestige, those were the things that were valuable, would then meet women who had been raised in the socialist context who were like, who cares? I don't need you for that. That's not what I'm looking for at
Yeah.
all. And I feel like so much of this conversation around gender and economic independence and trad wives and the sort of mystical ideal that we're being sold, that like somehow it was better off when you girls didn't have to have a job, and it was so much better when a man provided for you and you were submissive. And I think that women are young women, it sounds like, are noticing that those things don't make a whole lot of sense for them,
I think that's
in
right.
addition to obviously not wanting to get murdered.
I know, how selfish. But there was when I was looking into this for a post I had made on Instagram, I came across an example that I think is really telling of kind of what young people are experiencing. So there was a woman who posted, no, but here's an excerpt of a letter from the girls at my high school addressed to school administrators, written 1 year before I started high school there. The sooner everyone accepts, I'm not endorsing the statement, the sooner everyone accepts that little boys are actual monsters, the sooner we can start problem solving. The reason she's saying that is what happened at her school was that boys had created accounts for their classmates, their girl classmates, on Pornhub and other similar sites, and then made up usernames for them that I'll see if I can say a couple of them. They're disgusting, but we'll share a link to this. Um, the usernames, this is what the email says. The usernames written for girls and LGBTQ plus students were particularly disgusting, attacking their physical appearance, religion, sexuality, race, and gender identity. And then this is the letter that was sent to school administrators that she was referencing. Okay, so they're terrible. I trigger warning, they're really terrible. So like one is ugly monster bitch, one is dirty ass whore, one is ooh, I sorry, these are terrible. Dirty terrorist. Um, one is ugly forehead. I'm skipping the overtly racist ones. Anyway, so that's what a lot of girls are contending with. And so I want to
Well,
acknowledge,
yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that things aren't great for boys either. Like, I'm fully aware. I mean, I've looked at a lot of the data around this, and I I have long written about gender and said that we are not, as a society, doing service for boys. We're not serving boys and men well because of the rigidity of patriarchy and the definitions of masculinity that are outdated and rigid and make it hard for boys to know how to channel their feelings, right? We tell them, as a society, we tell them the only appropriate expression of emotion for boys is anger. Whereas girls are allowed sadness, right? we're allowed frustration, we're allowed a wider range, even though we're treated terribly regardless, but there's a wider range of acceptable emotionality outside of the workplace. Of course, women aren't allowed to be emotional at all at work, because if we do that, then we're problematic. But boys, we have such narrowly described views as a society about what it is to be a boy, what it is to be a man, that they aren't allowed free range of expression. And this is some of these things that we're seeing are a consequence of that. So I do want to for sure acknowledge that this isn't a conversation about how boys are terrible and let's start over, but it's what happens in our society as a consequence of these rules that we have constructed. These are made up, right? There's nothing innate here. There's nothing um, inexorable about the way our society is. We have designed it this way, and this is the consequence of that.
Yeah, and again, as somebody who's trying to raise a boy to be a nice adult, um, it is really hard to try to not. It's so easy to fall into some of these things, and um, it requires so much constant tending, I think, also as a parent. And I think a lot of parents are not aware of these dynamics and are not, the study of gender is not typical. We obviously are having a very difficult time in this country right now having any sort of conversations around gender and what does that mean and all of these societal norms that you're referencing. And again, when we think about the cycle of violence and what you said about, boys having really only one acceptable emotion, you can see as well how that very easily just throttles that cycle over and over again to just keep that wheel spinning. And then generation after generation of harm happens.
Absolutely. And then you have things like we've talked about before, men at on the aisle about to say their vows, and they're holding up something that says "Help me," and the ways that those messages of how men shouldn't want to be with women get reinforced in all sorts of different ways, and young girls and women see that too. Why would we want to put ourselves in a position where we're going to be humiliated at our own wedding? And then this person on Twitter had said, "I miss the days when a wedding was the last time you'd see a woman in public." And it's easy to write off these things as, oh, that's just one person. Why make a big deal about it? But these are messages that are repeated everywhere on every platform, everywhere you turn around. And for young girls, I think it's understandably disheartening to see that kind of stuff. And then you say, you know what? I'm just going to stay in my safe place. I want to add one more piece of data, and then we'll probably wrap up this conversation. There was some survey data for folks in a few different countries: Canada, Republic of Ireland, Malaysia, New Zealand, South Africa, Turkey, and the United States. Um, and sorry, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, and some other countries, for people of adults of various ages. And what they found looking by generation was that the divide on these questions that they asked about gender was the largest for Gen Z than as compared to the previous generation. So they asked, for example, I define myself as a feminist. What percent of boys and girls or men and women agree? And for Gen Z, that was the largest gap: 32% of men and 53% of women. They ask whether men are being expected to do too much to support equality. And again, the largest gap being among Gen Z, where it was 60% of male respondents agreed that men are being asked to do too much, whereas only 38% of female respondents said that. And also, they asked, we have gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men. Men were far more likely than women to agree, especially among Gen Z. So I know you're laughing because to us it's absurd, right? Because we study these things, we talk about these things all the time, and so we fully understand how wrong it is to believe that men are expected to do too much because the expectation is so low. We were just talking about how low the bar is. It's extraordinarily low. We're like praising Piers Morgan for saying women deserve equal rights. Like that's that's where the bar is. Um, but that's the world that we're living in, and
Bad.
it's terrible. It's terrible. And okay, the last thing I want to say about this whole discussion is, when you and I were growing up, if you watch like rom-coms, you watch TV shows, right? The most common narrative about relationships was that women wanted to tie men down. Like it was the ball and chain, right? Marriage was a ball and chain. Women wanted these relationships and men were trying to escape them, right? Like they didn't want to be restricted by these darn women trying to like catch them in some sort of trap. And the reason I mention that is at that time, nobody was saying it was disastrous if women were more likely to want to be married than men. Nobody said that. Nobody said it was bleak for society. But now that the data are swapped and women are less interested in marriage than are men, those are the words that are being used: catastrophic, bleak, disastrous. So, why was it okay for women to want something that men didn't want,
No,
but it's
because it
not
was
okay for men to want something that women don't want?
yeah, it was completely normalized. Completely normalized that this is just, love crazy girls. They're just looking for their MRS degree.
That's
Give me
right.
my medical degree.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten an MRS. I'm 45. Maybe it'll still happen. I'm not betting on it. Anyway, I hope this was interesting to discuss. I think it's a massive problem that we're going to probably revisit because it's just so integral to the dynamics of our society and affects every aspect of things, like including our political sphere and also what happens in healthcare and everything else that we care about.
Well, Arghavan, I think there's never been a better time than for us to say, take two and call me in the morning. What are you taking this week?
Okay, so what I've been really loving is again going back to our Diddy documentary conversation. There's a scene in the documentary where they show Diddy at the I think it was the MTV Awards after Big had died, Notorious B.I.G. had died. If folks remember that song, this was very popular when you and I were young. Where Diddy uses Sting's music from Every Step You Take, Every Move You Make, I'll Be Watching You, and makes it like dedicates that song basically to Biggie about like how he misses him. If you watch the documentary, it comes off as quite disingenuous because there are theories that he was involved in the murder of Biggie. But this scene is at the MTV Awards, and Sean Combs is wearing an all white outfit, and he comes out with a series of very unusual dance moves. And I don't know how else to describe it except for like it's very jaunty and very it's really hard for me to find the words, but like much more chipper than you would expect for a song that is about mourning someone. Okay. And so what people on the internet have been doing is filming themselves wearing white outfits, doing all sorts of things, and using that music. And they're saying, like, point of view, your best friend just died, but you still need to make dinner. And so they go through Costco and they're wearing a white outfit and doing this sort of dance. And people are so creative and funny. The one that I just saw, hold on, which one was the last one that I saw? I have several screenshots because they're so good. And we'll put a link in the notes. Oh, I think it's on my other phone. I'm sorry. One was point of view, your scar celebrating Mufasa's death. So good. From The Lion King. Anyway, we'll put links in the show notes, but that trend, it makes me laugh every single time because people are so funny. And it is just such an absurd thing that anyway, that's part of the Diddy documentary situation. He capitalized off Biggie's murder in really terrible ways. Anyway, what's bringing you joy? Or what are you taking, I guess, this week? Let me just message.
So, I don't know if you've seen it or not. There has been a clip that's been going around of this lawyer who's like, he looks like he's wearing a very expensive suit and he has like, fancy glasses. And he's talking about how being a lawyer is so much harder than being a doctor. And it's so much harder than being a pilot because, the law is so adversarial. And, when you're a doctor, you don't have like an opponent. And the clips that have been made to this are just delicious, for one. But the one that I think is my favorite is it switches and it's a stitch and it goes to this physician who turns on the like, I don't know if it, I'm not a football person, but my husband watches a lot of football. But there's this like da 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 da
Da da
da da
da
da
da.
da, and they're always playing it on TV when the commentators are talking about the players. And so he's like, I'm going to give you my top 5. And it's like, number 1, long-standing person in the game, RFK Jr. And, it just goes through his list of like the top 5 things that physicians are constantly battling against in the provision of care. And I laughed so hard, I almost peed my pants. So
That's awesome. I think I did see that, uh, and I thought it was brilliant. And I also think this idea that like what profession is harder is just silly. I think they've all got their unique challenges, and I don't know what
it's
the
so
point.
silly.
I don't know what the point of the whole conversation was. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode. If you didn't like what you heard, this has been the Huberman Lab. If you liked it, please don't forget to subscribe or follow The Present Illness, leave us a review or at least a rating, and tell literally anyone you know to tune in.
You can follow us on all the places. We are on TikTok and Instagram at The Present Illness to stay on top of all of our TPI-related news.
We will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, and take a nap. We'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan Salles and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan Salles. And original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. So please take your medical questions to a qualified professional.